Hey everybody, I want to talk about some maintenance things today with ARs, mainly having to do with the lowers, but I'm also going to touch real quick on two things on the uppers. I'll probably do a more in-depth video later on. While I'm thinking about it, hit the subscribe, hit the like button if you like these videos. So you have two pins on your AR, you take it apart for cleaning everything else, front pin, back pin, you push those out. And if you want to remove the carrier group and everything and the charging handle, you just pop the release on the charging handle. You can pull the whole thing out. And like I said, I may do another video on this later, but inside of here you have a gas tube. Let's grab something different here quick. You have a gas tube that runs the gas system on the AR. There's a connector right here that runs gas down a silver tube just inside of there, and it comes out. One second here. The gas comes out right here inside your AR, and then it goes into this here and runs the carrier group and everything. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you're taking this apart is very carefully pull out this little cotter pin right here that holds the firing pin in place, and just turn the carrier group and it'll drop a firing pin out, and that's what obviously fires your gun each time you pull the trigger. Then push this in, turn this little pin here, and it'll probably just drop out. If not, you can just slide it out and hit the floor. And then the extractor and the assembly here comes out, and you can wipe that down, clean it. This only goes back in one way. So when you do put it back in, it only goes back in one way. However, if you do want to take the extractor off because you've got damage and it's not pulling shells out, you can drive that little pin out. I'm not going to do it right now because there's a tapping block that I don't have that makes it a lot easier. But when you put this back together, it does only go back in. The pin only goes in one way. So it's not going to go back in unless you have the pin in the right direction. But drop the pin in, turn, pull it back a little bit, drop your firing pin back in place after you've cleaned it, and then this little cotter pin goes back in, holds that all together. You got to get it just lined up to come through the other side here. Don't force it, don't hit it with a hammer, just work it around until you get it in there. That's in place. When you put this back in the gun, this has to be extended. It can't be in. If it's in, it's not going to go into the gun. So your charging handle has two wings on it here that slides into the corresponding spots inside your upper, and then this drops right into it after you've cleaned it, slides back together. So the main portion of this video now is going to focus on the lower. So once again, hit the subscribe button and we'll keep going on the lower. Okay, so with your lower, I already took the spring and the weight out. You can see right here. What you do is you depress this little plunger here, and this will pop loose, and you'll be able to pull it right out of the tube. And also let me pull this back out here for a minute. This is the magazine release. It has a spring, and then it has the little plunger on it that threads right in and holds your magazine release in place. And when you put this back in the gun, you want to tighten this to where your threads are even with the plunger. So it would be about right there, because that's nice and even right there. So when that goes back in, it'll keep the magazine. It goes through from here to the other side, and it keeps the magazine from dropping out until you depress the plunger. And that's why you've got the spring in there. Worst part about taking this class, like I said, I'm still trying to remember all the terms for everything, was finding the springs every time we lost a spring. So that's a part. Now there's a special wrench that you take when you pop this loose, and this is, if you have a add-on for like a sling or something, a lot of times they attach right here. Be careful when you take this loose. One, you're going to lose this spring here at the top that holds the buffer tube in. There's also a spring back here that holds the safety. So I've just got the basic wrench right now, so I'm going to pop this loose. But I'm going to do it very carefully and slowly so I don't lose the springs. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so that's loose, and this needs to be tightened to about 30 pounds. Now I'm holding this in because you're starting to see right in here the spring that holds the plunger, that holds the safety and stuff in place. So hold your plunger here and hold this in place while you take this loose. And it's not going to go all the way, but you don't want to lose either of them springs. So once that's loose, then I can turn this, maybe. Well, let's get the one spring off first. So very carefully, I'm going to turn that. I'm going to try not to let that spring go anywhere because it is under substantial pressure. Get this loose here. Give me 1 second. Should screw. Okay, so there's the spring that holds the plunger in place. You don't want to lose that. There's 2 of these for 2 different spots. They're pretty much the same spring. Now, okay, I'm gonna have to actually switch lowers real quick because this Anderson lower that I was using as my example has a type of nut on the bottom of their stock that I've never seen before. It's not a hex. It's some sort of weird star bit thing, so I'm gonna have to figure out how that comes out of there. But I'm gonna check my other AR and just see if it's got the more standard one so I can show how the safety selectors are moved. So I decided while I was putting this back together I might as well at least show how the hammer and stuff goes back in, and then I'll pull that out so I can show you that bottom spring. But so the hammer legs hook up on the trigger assembly down there, and then it's going to be under pressure, so you're going to want to push it in there, and I like to hold it in with my thumb. And then what I like to do is I like to watch the side here where the pin goes, and that way you can push it to where you need it to go, and you can watch for you to get it lined up and at least get one side lined up. So once you get one side in there, it's going to at least hold itself in place, and that pin should push right in. You see how mine it tapped right in there. Dink, done. So that holds the trigger in place. So now when you have your lower on fire, as long as everything's put back together, you should be able to pull the trigger and the hammer should come up. I don't let it slam, but it should hook back, and it should come right up. So that's properly functioning, at least for that part. So I'll lock that back. Like I said, the magazine release, put that piece in and run the post through, and then hold it in place with my finger, drop the spring onto it, and then there's 2 sides to this. One has grooves in it and one doesn't. The groove side goes out. So when I was putting these together, the guy that was teaching our class just said to go ahead and start it with the release over here, so at least you start the threads, and you'll be able to take a turn or 2 onto it there before you start running into stuff. Like there, I can't move it any further. So then what you do is you push this through, and we were using just like I'm going to use a hex wrench here. You push this through and hold it, and then you tighten it on this side. Oops. No, that's out. Turn it in. Couple of turns there, and then check it. Not quite flush there yet, so I'll push it through, and I'll take one more turn on it, hopefully without scratching up the finish on my lower. There it is. One more turn. You know what? One more turn. There. So now your magazine release is back and operational. Let me see here. Empty magazine. You'll be able to set it in there, it'll click in place, push the button, and it drops back out. So that's how you put that back in place. Then the fun part, like I said, since I'm putting this back together, we'll just keep going through the steps. This detent, this little piece of metal, is going to drop in here. But what we do is we'll put this in place, and there's a slot in this post here. So I'm going to slide that in, and I'm just going to leave it about right there. And then I'm going to tip it up, tip the lower up, and drop this detent into place. Then I'm going to drop this tiny little spring right on top of it. And what that does is that pushes the detent into the slot here on the pin and holds it in place. So you can see it doesn't turn. I don't have a lot of pressure on it, but it doesn't turn. So now, what you're going to want to do is you screw this back in place, and I'm going to pause here just for a second while I set this up, and then I'll turn the camera back on and show you how I put that in place. Okay, back to the video. As usual, things that can go wrong will go wrong. This thing had turned just slightly and was jammed. I don't think I damaged my threads there, but I had to pop it back over. So what I'm going to do now, actually I'm going to pull this spring back out for just a minute here. I'm going to keep the gun turned up so the detent stays in place, but then I'm going to turn this back in. There we go, started threading. So then I'm going to turn this back in until I get it just to, let's see, about right, just before I get to the plunge. Where's where the plunger sits? Oh, I just dropped my detent. See, there's what, got to be careful. I just almost dropped my detent on the floor and lost it. So I'm going to turn it into just before it gets to the area where the plunger would hit. Okay, so then I'm going to turn this to the side just a little bit so I can see the hole. Put the little detent piece of metal back in. Make sure this is lined up yet so it holds that in place, which it is. Then I'm going to drop the spring in. So the spring is in place. Now this is where you'll sometimes bend a spring because you got to back this off. You got to turn it just enough to get the spring where you can push it in place. And then what I was doing when we were doing the class is I was pushing this down. No, I'm going to have a hard time doing it. Push this down just to hold that spring into place. There. And then I'm going to bring this in just a little bit to hold it, keep that spring from going anywhere. Now I also don't want that spring to leave when I'm working on the other spring, so it's kind of a bear to hold them both in place. Might be able to do this one first, but you also don't want to tighten this up too much, because then you'll lose this one, or lose the ability to get this one in place. So, okay, let me turn this to the camera and see. So now the plunger and the spring are in place. I'm going to press that down. I'm going to hold this one. Now I'm going to turn just a little bit. Try and take one more turn to hold the plunger in. You know what? I think we did the plunger first when we were doing it. I'm going to go ahead and do that plunger first, I think. Because I'm going to lose that spring no matter what. So I'm going to give this a half a turn to hold that plunger in. Try not to drop my detent again. There, that holds that in. So plunger is now held in. Back this ring off just a little further because I'm going to have to be able to turn this piece in order to get that spring in there. So, get the spring back in, push it past, and then use the plate to hold it. Nope, I lost it. Did you see the detent come out of there, or the plunger come out of there? I didn't have quite enough pressure on it yet, so let me Let me go find those parts. Okay, so spring and plunger back in place, and you will notice you've got a little bit of play there, but like I said, if that thing comes out and hits you in the eye, you will take an eye out. So now I'm going to turn just a little bit to the side, which exposes that hole there. Put my rear post back in. Drop that little detent back in place, if I can get it in there. Put the spring back in. Like I said, push the spring past, and then get that back over just a little bit so the spring stays there. Okay, so the spring is in place, and the detents are in place, and the plunger's in place. So now that's there. So now I'm going to tighten this collar down to hold it all in place. Nope, see I'm off just a little bit because it's not there. Now it's flush. If this isn't flush, it's not right. So this should be completely flush when you're tightening it up. And then, my wrench, tighten that down just a little bit. And this should be tightened, I believe they were telling us, to about 30 pounds if you have a good wrench. Should be lined up. Okay, now in theory, my spring here is held in place, which it is. And in theory, my rear post here, you try and turn it, it doesn't turn. Pull it all the way back, it doesn't come out. So the spring is holding the detent into that little tube there. Then, take your spring and your plunger, push them in there, and you should be able to sneak it right in past the plunger. As you push down on it with a screwdriver, be careful with it though. In, and it holds the plunger in place. So that spring there is held in place by that plunger. So, alright, I'm going to grab the other one, take it down to where I've got just the safety in it, and then I'll show you how to take this. Okay, so this is a DPMS one. This is actually one of the first ARs, the first AR I ever bought. So once again, we'll go through this real quick. Push the pins. Tips forward, pops out. I won't go through the whole assembly again, but you got the carrier and stuff in the bulk carrier. So depress this, get the spring out. You should be able to do that with a fingernail if your fingernails are okay. If not, you got you can use a little screwdriver to do it. There are flatter sides to it, but let's use a screwdriver to push down on it. Get this started. Spring comes out. That up there. So again, I got the little wrench here. I'm gonna go get myself a better wrench. Not too distant future. Here, we'll pull this first because the safety, you actually don't have to take the whole thing apart first. So this one just has a standard flathead at the bottom. And what you do is you pull that flathead out. You may have to hold your grip in place when you do this. Some of the ones, the one I was working on when I took the class, I didn't have to. The fit was so tight that it held itself in place, but there is a spring in there that you don't want to lose, like I said. So let's let that off slowly. Okay, so the pressure's off, and now you can see the spring right there. It's the exact same spring as that other one that I showed you that holds the safety in place. So I'll finish backing this out. So grip is off. Like I said, there's just a standard screw in there. Spring comes out. And that's what holds the safety in place. So safety selector comes out, and there's also a detent, which I dumped out right there. Same thing, well, similar to the other one. Pointy end, flat end, and it comes out of that hole right there next to your your grip, and it's held in place by the grip. So if you need to change out your safety, that's what you do. You take the grip off, dump the detent, or take the spring out, dump the detent, drop the safety out. Semi-auto safeties just look like this. Full auto ones have a whole bunch of different weird grooves and stuff in them, and they've got a different hammer. Hammer's slightly different. This catch down here, there's a couple of catches in there. We got the C1. Once again, the magazine well release. Depress. Screw it out. Keep the spring together. Keep the release together. Like I said, I keep all these things together when I'm working on it because there's so many little springs that go different places. Once again, hammer, you can just push it out. Post holding it. Like I said, there's a block you can do to use to push these things out, which makes it a little easier. But I should be able to do it by hand too. So just a little thicker here. Oh, I don't want to pop out on this one. The other one popped out so nicely. I'm trying to put a little bit of downward pressure on it because that spring is pretty strong in there. But I may have to tap on it just a little bit. Just light taps when you do this stuff, not hard. It's moving already. There's a couple of spots on this gun you really don't want to break. There it went. So hammer's loose. See how this hammer is just a little different? Sorry, I was off screen there for a minute. The hammer's just a little different than the other one. But once again, spin it around, flat side to flat, and then legs to there. And same thing with the trigger assembly, press, pull the pin out, come on. Out. And since I have the safety out, I can pull this out on this one now. So that's trigger assembly. Important part about this, do not lose this little spring at the top here. It's in pretty solid because it's got a wider base on it, but if you do need to change that, you just take something solid like this, slide it into the spring, and you should be able to wiggle it around until the spring pops out. There it is. And this spring, like I said, has a wider base and a narrower top, and it goes right into that spot right there. It's widened out just a little bit on the trigger assembly. So it goes right back in there like that. You just press it into place pretty much, and that holds it there. This spring, if you break this spring, once again, it has to go on the exact way it's on right now. So let's take it off real quick. Slide it loose. So that's replaceable. So this spring has to go back on with the bottom part here underneath the ledge on the trigger. Has to go back on that way because that's what provides it the springiness. That clips back in, that clips back in. So that's your trigger assembly. Go, oops, down just a little low. Now I'm a little off on it because I don't want it below the trigger part. I want it just above it. There. That's where it needs to be. So that'll once again provide your trigger that springiness in there. And then this is the hook that hooks the hammer. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it holds the hammer in. So it has to go in the exact same way. And it sets in there. Okay, I found it. As usual, it had slid about 6 feet from where it dropped. So, like I was saying, there's a little indent in the metal right there. So this, and there's a hole right there for the post. So this goes there, and then that sits right into that and gives it the springiness to catch the hammer when it's coming back. So you see how that works. So that's your trigger assembly. The only other parts you can take off on this, and I'm not going to do it today because I don't have the right punches for it, is the slide release here. So when you're closing your chamber, you press this button. So there's a spring inside of here, and this is what releases the action and closes the action. So you press that down and boom, your action or push down, you're locking. Press it up when the action's locked and it closes the action. So I'm not going to take that one out. But that's your whole trigger assembly. So what I do is I take the trigger assembly, put it back. Actually, I'm going to keep this out for a second. Put the trigger assembly back in there like that. Then I'm going to put the catch here in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it down. I'm going to keep an eye down here for things to line up through that hole, and then as soon as I get it pretty close to lined up, I'm going to try and get this post started. And if you need to, just really light taps as you wiggle it around there and it'll pop in place. Sometimes what you have is it's just off of angle just a little bit. See, just some light taps and in it went. And then just make sure it's flush. It doesn't have to be, there's no exact, it just has to be flush in there. It's not going to come out. It's held in place by spring pressure. So your trigger, and you can see the trigger's moving, so that's good. Hammer, same thing. Legs behind the trigger post, and then press in and hold it there so it doesn't come flying out at you. And once again, you're going to want to watch the holes where the posts go. Just make sure it goes into place. That is not my post. I think my post broke. Okay, I've never seen that happen before. I'm going to have to go find another post because the post for the hammer broke. Okay, well, we'll put the hammer back in a little bit. So, this post should be a little longer, and it snapped. So I'm going to have to go buy one of those and replace it. But for the safety, so place the safety back in. Once again, you've got fire and safe. Drop the little detent in, pointy end down. Put the spring above it. There it is, it's dropped into place. And then your stock, there's a hole on there. So your spring goes into there, and then you hold it in place. Then you get to weasel this little thing into place. What I was doing before is some of the ones with the hexes are a little easier, but this one you can do it. You just got to slide it down in there, get it to drop over the edge. There it is. And then get it to start threading so it'll hold itself in place. And then, like I said, you want to keep that in place so the spring doesn't go anywhere, because that's going to keep your safety working properly. It keeps dropping off there. Almost tight enough. There we go. So, trigger works. Like I said, I'm going to have to get a new post for the hammer and then check the safety. Safety works. You can hear it clicking. It's held in place. It's not moving. Excellent. Okay, folks. I went in town, hit the local Shield store up and bought a lower parts kit, knowing that all of these parts would probably eventually be needed at some point, but I should have an extra pin in here. Put that pin into the hammer, and then I'll show you the weapons functionality tests that we went through, so that you can know for sure that your AR is put together properly. And we'll see if I put mine together properly. There's the pin that I need right there. So once again, like I was saying before, the two legs of the hammer go over the top of the trigger, and then you push it down in there. Take a look at it, give it a little line up right there. And we're in. And then you just have to make sure that you get the other side lined up too, because sometimes they're not quite. And there we are, we're in. So now we're on fire, pull the trigger, hammer comes up, locks back, goes up. So we're good there. So we're going to go ahead and put this back together, and we'll put the spring in first. That would help. Nothing's going to operate without the spring in place. Sneak this by there. Whoop, and I dropped the plunger. I'm just all butterfingers today. Alright. So, hammer lock back, safety works. Trigger's not pulled the safety on. Trigger pulls with the safety off. So, oops. Pull this back out. Get the front one lined up. Why does everything work harder when you're trying to videotape it? There we go. Okay, so we're back together. So functions check then is, does the action pull? Does it lock back? Locks open. Chamber's empty. Then we want the action to go forward with the push of the button. Done. And if you have it on fire, you want to hear it click. There it is. And this sear reset works. You can hear that. If I hold the trigger in, fire, then let off real slowly, you hear that sear reset pin. There it is. So, functioning properly. Excellent. So that's how you put the lower back together from pretty much completely stripped, except for, like I said, I didn't push that pin out for the action release lever here. But anyway, we'll talk to y'all later. If you do venture into this, like I said, be careful. There's some parts on here you don't want to break. Your trigger guard's kind of weak there, so I'm going to be buying a AR Armors kit, which actually has a tapping box you can put all this in use. Where if you're gonna replace your trigger guard here, you can tap that out without breaking these. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to EWL. It's an Extreme Weapons Lube. It's a full synthetic lube. It's really good. I'm starting to use it on all my weapons now. It's full synthetic, so if it gets really cold out, this isn't going to gum up and slow things down, where the non-synthetics may do that. So we're going to be using this from now on all my guns when I'm lubing stuff. So, all right, we'll talk to you later.